back, you all. CHD 220, Chapter 3, the decision to parent. As we go through this chapter, we're going to talk a little bit about unplanned pregnancies, the reason people want to become a parent, teenage pregnancies, and also delayed pregnancy. So let's look at unplanned pregnancies for just a minute. Probably one of the major things that we need to understand is that there's sometimes can be problems associated with unplanned and unwanted children. Many times as school-age children, they're likely to have academic problems. Sometimes they have fewer friends and more behavioral problems during their school-age years. As teen and adults, they often have more conflicts with others. They may be unhappy with their jobs and their marriages. However, parents typically in these unplanned situations as infants, they welcome them. They're welcomed at the time of their birth. However, due to being unplanned and possibly not being old enough, possibly, or not having the support that they need, as children grow older, is where we begin to experience some of the issues. So let's talk about some of the factors that actually influence parenting. Sometimes becoming parents is a natural extension of a couple's love for each other. And so it's kind of a way to express marital love. However, let's be clear that it should not be the only reason a couple chooses to have a child. Lots of times couples just want to become parents because they want to nurture and raise a child. Possibly maybe they have one child and they want to add to their families. Lots of times, one thing to think about is that expectations about parenthood. Parenthood should be a choice, not an expectation. So sometimes I think some couples can be influenced from outside family members, maybe like extended family, to say, hey, y'all need to have a baby, or when am I going to become a grandparent? And that is certainly not something that that couples should consider when they are choosing to have a child or not. Let's talk about having expectations. A lot of times, what are realistic expectations and where do we get them? Certainly realistic expectations are not necessarily instinctual. We're not born with them. We get our expectations about parenting from maybe possibly our own parents, maybe watching some friends' parents, maybe magazine articles. The internet's a great source, but it's certainly not instinctual. We're not born with the expectation of how to be a really good parent. As I said earlier, pressures from outside family members or extended family members and friends is certainly not something we should consider as to whether or not we have a child or not. Of course, sometimes this might be a reason, a desire to influence the partner, but of course, this is not a very good option nor reason for having a child. Considering individual and couple goals for your life is an important first step in making a decision about having children. Couples need to discuss this. They need to discuss their goals. What are their views about parenting very early in their relationship before they add a child to the mix? Children impact your goals. They impact your career. They also impact your finances. So having these discussions ahead of time makes that transition from being a couple to being parents a little bit easier. All right, we're going to skip on through this a little bit. And let's look at this. For middle income parents, the cost to raise a child from birth to 17 averages about $234,000, really $235,000. And I think that's kind of on the low end, actually. So it's a big commitment. It's not only a nurturing commitment, but it's also a financial commitment. So, what is our readiness for parenthood? We need to determine whether we're ready for the role of parenthood. And this will involve many different factors that include your marital relationship, responsibilities, lifestyle changes, because certainly becoming a parent will change your lifestyle. Are you mature enough to have a child? What kind of knowledge base do you have about rearing children? Your age is certainly something to consider, and also your health. So married couples may ask themselves, is our marriage strong and secure? Because certainly adding another human into the mix can test your marriage. So you want to make sure that your marriage is a strong one and a secure one. Or do you communicate well? Because definitely as couples with children, you have to communicate. Do we generally disagree or do we generally agree? That's another thing. However, you have to, one of the things you have to consider too is, are we willing to keep our marriage the primary relationship in our lives? So many times people feel like the child or the children should come first, when that is actually not the case. Your marriage should not be put last for the sake of your children, because if you keep your marital relationship the primary focus, then you're strong and secure, you're communicating, you're agreeing more, and you have a healthy, happy home, which is a good thing for children to grow up in. Let's move on a little bit and let's get on over to risk and challenges of teen pregnancies or teen parents, older parents. So high-risk parenting can be especially challenging for teens. Delayed parenting can also be that way, especially and typically an older parent is those that are over the age of 35, and sometimes those pose challenges for the parents as well as the babies. The vast majority of teen pregnancies are unplanned. Of course, that goes to stand to reason. Becoming pregnant during the teen years creates health risks for both the mother and the baby, and you have a much higher infant mortality rate for teen mothers rather than for other mothers. A lot of times teens in pregnancy, they don't think it can happen to them. It can happen to everybody else, but it can't happen to them. So that is one of the reasons that we see teenage pregnancy a lot, is they just don't think it can happen to them. Of course, like I said earlier, they're all, most often they're unplanned. They're high risk. But one thing that I think that is so important to realize with teen parenthood is that they need so much outside support, and oftentimes, unless they have a very supportive family, they don't receive that outside support like they need. Teen parents face many challenges, health risks, social emotional problems, educational and career risk. Of course, there's that financial risk. So there are a lot of risks and challenges associated with teen pregnancy. Now, there is also, now we talked about teenage pregnancy, so let's talk about pregnancy of an older person. So there's a biological risk when you are a woman over the age of 40, or like we said earlier, really, I guess over the age of 35 is considered where you become at risk. But one of the things is if you're over 40, typically women are less fertile and they are at a much higher risk for having a child with Down syndrome. Lots of times parents think, well, the older I am, the better my finances are when I'm born. So it might mean when the child is born. So it might be a better thing for me to wait. However, there are lots of risk factors, and that Down syndrome, which is a birth defect, is one of the main ones. So that you will want to continue to go on through this chapter, look over the PowerPoint. I'm just kind of going through it as we're finishing up, and also make sure you look into supplemental resources so that you can read your chapter 3. One of the things I love about this chapter are the quotes at the end, and this is a quote by Elizabeth Stone, and it says, making the decision to have a child is momentous. It is to decide forever to have your heart go walking outside of your body. And I think that's exactly right, because every time our children leave us, when they're going into something new, it really is like watching your heart right outside of your body. Well, thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next week.